I didn't go into this movie expecting to see maybe Sylvester Stallone's best scene in cinema. All of that just culminated in this great product. Then I'm introduced to Commando. And then the stupid marimba starts playing. It doesn't stop for the rest of the movie.
Welcome to Film Fights, where we don't just talk about movies, we make them fight. Today, continuing our 80s tournament bracket, and just a reminder, we have 2 whole brackets. Roll the clip. At the Film Fights podcast, cousin Kyle, the Fob, and I are excited to announce what we believe to be a first-of-its-kind 80s action movie tournament, pitting the best action movies against each other until we determine the greatest action movie of the 1980s. We are really looking forward to this tournament, but we need your help. We have 2 different models of tournament bracket to choose from, and we would like you to vote on which one you think is best. Bracket A is a classic seeded tournament. Our crack staff spent hours correlating the rankings from multiple greatest lists, aggregating the rankings using a complex process to pre-rank each movie. This approach would protect the highly ranked movies from facing off with each other early on in the tournament. Bracket B is listed by action subgenre. It matches up the best films from different action categories like action comedy, post-apocalyptic, and sci-fi action. In addition to finding the greatest action movie of the 1980s, this approach would also help us determine the best movie in each action subgenre. You can vote on which bracket you like the best by commenting down below or by voting in the poll on my community section on my channel page. For our first round, we will be evaluating these films on a variety of categories: narrative and pacing, characters, action sequences and choreography, cinematography and special effects, music and sound design, and lastly, themes and motifs. Each category has a different maximum point total based on how important we deem the category to be. The movie with the highest score will advance to the next round. One reason we are super excited for this tournament is that we actually haven't seen most of these classic action films on the list. We want to take a fresh look at these 1980s movies with a Gen Z perspective and see which ones still hold up, which ones do not, and ultimately determine the greatest action movie of the 80s. There's 2 brackets. You can still vote. There's still time. So you can go in the comments below and say which one you like better, bracket A, bracket B, or you can go to my community and my channel page and vote there if you prefer. Now, let's get into First Blood versus Commando. First Blood, directed by Ted Kotcheff and based on the novel by David Morrell, was adapted for screen by Michael Kozel, William Sackheim, and Sylvester Stallone, who also stars in the film. Released in 1982, the movie introduces audiences to John Rambo, a troubled Vietnam War veteran who finds himself embroiled in a violent conflict with law enforcement in a small town. Rambo's struggle to adapt to civilian life and the harsh treatment he receives from local authorities triggers a ferocious response, showcasing his survival skills and combat training. The film not only impresses with its methodical action sequences and explosive set pieces, but also offers commentary on the challenges faced by veterans returning home, making First Blood a poignant and action-packed exploration of the aftermath of war. Commando, directed by Mark L. Lester and written by Stephen E. D'Souza, was released in 1985. The film stars Arnold Schwarzenegger as John Matrix, a retired Special Forces colonel who embarks on a relentless mission to rescue his kidnapped daughter Jenny from a Latin American dictator's mercenaries. Known for its explosive action sequences and iconic one-liners, Commando epitomizes the high-octane, action-packed thriller genre of the 1980s. Schwarzenegger's character, with his unparalleled combat skills and determination, navigates through a series of intense battles, utilizing an array of weapons and tactics to thwart his adversaries and save his daughter, culminating in a climactic showdown that cements the film's status as a cult classic in action cinema. Round number 1, we have narrative and pacing, which is worth 10 full points. We're gonna start with First Blood this time. I actually think that First Blood is paced really well for what the movie is. It doesn't take too long to get into the action. There's like a minor tension and build up between from when he gets arrested and he's in the prison, because you know John Rambo is about to snap. And when he does, it doesn't feel like it took too long, which leads to an action scene. And then you get some more tension, which leads to another good action scene where he's in the forest and kind of being Batman, essentially, and stealth taking people out without killing them. And then that leads to another action scene where there's shooting rocket launchers in the mine, and you have him traveling through that mine, which is a really tense and gripping scene and is awesome. And then you have that final action scene where he's just decided to destroy the city. And then when he fights up against the cop guy Teasel, and then he has that really great ending scene where he kind of talks about the trauma of war and PTSD, which is just such a cool way to end a dumb 80s action movie that to the point where the movie doesn't feel that dumb once you reach the end of it, which is something I can't say about like 90% of these movies, even the ones that I really like and think have value.
It's not a dumb 80s action movie. I wouldn't even describe it like that. I think the pacing is really good. Things are happening, but it's not happening too fast, not too slow. It's really nice pacing. The movie's not too long. It's perfect.
It's a really nice, tightly paced hour and 33-minute romp. And so it moves pretty fast, but you feel like you get a lot of impact in that time span. And so I can really appreciate it.
So I should recap a little what my thoughts were going into this, because I hadn't seen either of these movies. I'd never seen a Rambo movie before. So all I knew about it was that it was the popular action movie. Except I don't think anyone even talked about First Blood much. They were always talking about the rest of the ones.
Yeah, he kills a lot more people in the rest of them.
Right. So I was going into this movie, and I totally didn't expect it to go the way it did. How it starts off very peaceful, and he's kind of a respectful guy. Like you said, it builds the tension very well, and how it builds up to him finally snapping and having to break out and run away. That was a lot better than I was expecting it to be, because all I knew it was this like fun action movie. It's super well paced because I felt there was a great amount of time between each action scene. I was worried that the times when he could take a break from the action was going to be weaker points where they try to involve themselves more in like deep character moments for him, and those actually were strong moments. They were very, very good moments with him talking to his old commander about their history together and what he's going through now. A lot more nuance than I was expecting, and a lot more depressing real world things going at the time. I don't know that the movie's totally realistic, but of course, we don't expect that from these, but having that realistic narrative spin on it was very fun to watch. His speech at the end was completely out of left field. That was what made me realize, wow, this was not just a fun 80s action romp. That really elevated it for me.
Yeah, kind of like when we talked about RoboCop and how at the end of the day, it's kind of a little bit silly with its premise. And I think Rambo or First Blood is less silly with its premise. It elevates that material to a level where you can look at it beyond just being a fun 80s action romp, even though it still is that. Having fun and diverse action scenes while also at the same time being that higher level of storytelling elevates the material to a level where I 100% agree with you that it makes it more, and it makes it more special, and it makes it rewatchable too. It's one of those movies you want to show your friends, be like, hey, you should watch this. This is good, actually. It subverts your expectations a little bit as well, because usually with these movies, you're expecting this climactic action scene, and it feels very climactic without it being an action scene.
Yeah.
So from a narrative perspective, and it could hurt this in the action scenes potentially, from a narrative perspective, it's really, really strong.
I didn't go into this movie expecting to see maybe Sylvester Stallone's best scene in cinema. I was like, wow, that was powerful.
Very powerful. I mean, it got the fob to shut up and be
what is that supposed to mean? What is that supposed to mean?
Absolutely silent during the speech, which I thought was really well done.
Yeah, that's one where I'd love to be in theater for the first time watching something like that. All of that just culminated in this great product. Then I'm introduced to Commando, and then the stupid marimba starts playing. It doesn't stop for the rest of the movie. And it's the movie starts out, he's with his daughter, it's like, ah yes, I am a soldier. And then Commander comes over, General, and says, you are soldier, I need you to soldier again. And he's like, I am done being soldier, I have daughter. And then daughter is kidnapped, and he says, I need to save daughter, I must become soldier again. And then, yeah, the rest of the movie happens, the end.
This movie was one of the worst pace movies I've ever seen.
So
Yeah, I almost wonder if like it gets the negative points, bring it back up a bit, because I don't think you can pace a movie worse, because
some of the worst pacing I've ever seen.
There is writing at the beginning and there is no writing after that. It is just pure action in every single scene, and there is no explanation, there is no anything, there is no story after that, and it's just action scenes.
If you space out for like half a second and you look back, you'll be like, where am I?
It's true. I told you, I had one part of the movie where I think he gets arrested. I had to rewind it, and I'm like, okay, I'll still pay attention to the movie. So I rewound it, and then I still didn't understand it. So I rewound it again, I think a little further back, and I still didn't understand what was happening. I'm like, wait, this doesn't make any sense. I watched it, like a big section of it all the way through again, and I'm like, no, this still doesn't make any sense.
This movie throws so much crap at you so fast at such a rate that you just feel confused.
Pure high octane.
It is pure high octane. Just to walk you through the events.
It's total nonsense. I thought for sure I was missing something. Like I was missing a scene. I'm like, no, it just kept going.
On a higher level, it makes you think it's going to be a bunch of different types of movies. It starts off with like, my special forces team is getting killed. And then it's like, hey, now you got to do this espionage thing in like Venezuela or something and overthrow like this government. And then he's like, nah, screw that. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I was wondering where that plot line went.
It went nowhere. And then he jumps off of a moving plane going 300 miles per hour into a 3-foot swamp. And he just stands up like, yeah, I'm fine.
Oh, you just roll out of it, dude. It's parkour. You just like hit that part in your back and you just roll out of it.
And my last thoughts on Commando, I'll just say, is that everyone is right. It's complete nonsense. It's absurd. I will give it some points because the through line is him saving his daughter. I guess it's serviceable enough. And there's a lot of really funny moments in this movie, some of which to this day, I'm not sure whether they were intentionally funny or not. But
hey, I laughed more in this movie than I did I don't think I laughed in Rambo.
I always say this, if a movie's boring, it sucks. If you're just bored and uninterested, then your movie sucks. I was still interested in this movie. This is an hour and 30 minutes. It's not going to take up too much of your time. And I think that this, like Rambo, is a movie that I would love to show a group of friends for completely different reasons. I texted Kyle after, like, I cannot believe that this is a real movie that really exists in reality. And I just watched it.
And it's one of my favorite things you've said. It's one of my favorite takes of yours on movies.
Yes.
So, I can't believe this movie is a real thing.
But that in and of itself is an accomplishment. I will be giving it a couple extra points for that, but only a couple.
All right, so what are we doing?
All right, let's get to scoring. We're going to start with First Blood.
First Blood gets a 10 out of 10 for its pacing and narrative.
I am giving First Blood a 10 out of 10 for great pacing and a narrative that elevates the material of 80s action movies.
Across the board, then. I'm also giving it a 10. I don't know what could be improved in narrative and pacing in particular, and that was the part of it that engaged me the most.
Now, let's move on to Commando.
I gave Commando a 2 out of 10 for pacing and narrative, because it, once again, one of the worst paced movies I've ever seen.
I am giving Commando a 5 because while on paper it is the worst narrative and pacing possible, I loved it anyway. So, because I was so thoroughly entertained.
Because Commando has not only some of the worst narrative and pacing that will probably be on this whole bracket, but that may, for pacing, maybe the worst I've ever seen. It was going to be a 0, but because it's so not boring that it gets itself 2 whole points.
It's pretty impressive if you ask.
Because it at least has that going for it, and I don't know where else to apply it.
Is because Madam Web exists. There's worse out there.
Tune in for that.
Moving on to round 2, we have characters, which is a 5-point category. John Rambo as a character is actually very in-depth, which is something I cannot say about most protagonists from the 80s. On one hand, he's actually very polite at the beginning, but when he's pressed by that cop, who at the end of the day wasn't, like, I would say he was being an a-hole, but like not like, it wasn't like beating him. He gave him a ride, but he made it clear that, like, yeah, you're not welcome here. You see that moment where he looks at the, oh, I could just keep walking, and he chooses war. Rambo is a warrior. He doesn't know anything else, and he makes that very clear at the end of this film with his beautiful monologue. I wanted to specifically wait to talk about this here, but I hear a lot of crap about how Sylvester Stallone is a bad actor, and between his performance in Rocky and as Rambo in this movie, I cannot agree. I'm sure he's had bad performances, but his monologue at the end is so powerful. It's something that really, really resonated with me. I remember I had an acting class when I was in college, and they had us choose one scene. That exemplary performance is what it was. And I actually chose that scene because I thought it was one of the most powerful scenes in cinema that I'd ever watched. And it's also so unexpected. And Sylvester Stallone killed it, showing that he has these violent tendencies, but he almost doesn't want to hurt anyone at the same time. And it's this interesting duality between not wanting to kill people, but also being so inherently violent and suffering from PTSD. Makes him a very nuanced and in-depth character where he's not perfect for sure.
He's just one of the most in-depth characters of a regular 80s action movie. Like you say, I like that dynamic of him just kind of choosing that he's not going to stand up for discrimination anymore, and he's going to go back and he's going to play it out. I love the buildup of him with his PTSD and the flashbacks to war and everything, where you just feel for him the whole time, is because it is an exploration of just that torturous life and situation he's going through. And I think in that way, it was extremely solid. I also think the villain, Officer Teasel, I didn't like him at first because it was like, this just feels unrealistic at this point, what he's doing. But then I thought about it, and I'm like, would a cop do all this? Maybe. I think someone in the position of authority having that kind of an ego over it, like convincing himself so hard that he is the good guy and trying to do all the kinds of mental gymnastics to keep himself in the right and being completely stubborn about it, that actually made me appreciate him a lot more.
Yeah, I think the side characters in Rambo, while they're not necessarily like super deep, they do feel very realistic and kind of nuanced. I mean, there's that one cop that's just evil.
You don't buy this thing, right? I swear to God, I will kill you.
I would say he was the most exaggerated character.
But I don't even think he was that exaggerated. Like, I could see an actual cop doing that.
And that's the thing. You can really see that there's people out there like that. Maybe watched one too many Westerns, and they live in this small town, and they're looking for action, and they're looking to
they think they're the sheriff.
Yes, and they're going all Commando, if you would. It might have been semi-exaggerated, but it still completely worked. And honestly, for an 80s action movie, that man is practically nuanced. So, yeah, so I don't really have a problem with that. Troutman as a character, I like him. I like how you can tell how much he cares for John Rambo. I like that scene where Teasel asks him, like, are you gonna give him a hug, or are you gonna shoot him in the head when you get the chance? And he's like, I don't know. Guess I'll never find out, because they thought he was dead, but you can kind of tell he knew he was still alive. Yeah. And so seeing that what he actually ended up doing was giving him a hug at the end was, I think, a really good moment. One thing I will say as a critique of Troutman, and I don't think I'll hold this too high, is it felt like he was a little too expositionary sometimes in his dialogue. Well, I like him as a hype man for Rambo, saying, hey, these are all the things Rambo can do, and the things that we see him do in later entries. It felt a little bit like, well, Rambo's not actually going to kill anyone in this movie, because he doesn't. So we have to let him know that he could very easily. And so it felt sometimes, just for me, a little bit forced. But I get his purpose is to hype up Rambo and make him seem like, yeah, he is this sort of unstoppable force.
What I like especially is that, because with exposition, the one thing you never want to do is say as you know. You want a character to give exposition by telling another character something they already know. Since he is technically still on his side, he's giving Teasel important information about Rando and giving him the idea of just how dangerous this guy is. And he was kind of right, because they didn't beat him.
Yes.
They did not win.
And that's why overall I don't think I would dock any points for it, but it is something I just wanted to mention because I did actively have that thought when I was watching this movie for like the third or fourth time.
I disagree with the exposition. I thought I liked the exposition from Drummond. I guess I watched a lot of anime though, so I think all the characters in Rambo are great. Rambo probably the best written character, other than maybe like two others on this entire bracket, maybe one other. The cops are, most of them aren't that in depth, but the main cop, the Teasel, is, I like his character a lot.
Well, one thing I'll say is I find them enjoyable. Like they all feel like they have different personalities, and I like how that they very much stress that this isn't like their only job. Like one dude's got to go back to the drugstore the next day. This is a small town, and their rapport is really good. You have like the redheaded guy who's like, "Hey man, maybe we should dip. I don't like this." Then you have
Game over, man.
Exactly. And then you have this guy who looks strangely like Tucker Carlson, but he was like more gung-ho, but then when he gets caught, he's like, all right, time to go. And I think that the rapport amongst side characters, while their role's very small in the movie, it worked pretty well.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
I do like that there's only a few characters, but they explore those characters very deeply.
Yes.
I like that kind of.
Yeah. And so that's for that. I think we should talk about, Commando's characters though.
Go ahead, buddy.
So, there's the main character of Commando is also named John Matrix instead of Rambo, unfortunately. Really. It's very hard to make a character with that little depth. But
they found a way.
Like, I feel like you'd actually have to try to make a character with that little depth. But at the end of the day, it's a fun action movie. But yeah, there's not really any characters in that movie, I feel like, that really have any depth at all. The most in-depth character is like an obese version of Freddie Mercury who wears chainmail to protect himself from guns, I guess.
I forgot about that. Why did he have chainmail?
I don't know. I don't know.
Wearing gay leather pants.
Good night.
And the only depth to his character is that he didn't really like John Matrix because he kicked him off his combat squad for being too violent.
Ever since you had me thrown out of your unit, I've waited to pay you back.
Like 30 years ago. So
Bro looks straight out of an episode of Regular Show.
He does. No, he really does.
like the D&D guy in Regular Show.
He does look like the D&D guy in Regular Show. And that's what I mean. There's not really much depth to any of the characters, but they had some fake country, I'm pretty sure. I don't think that was a real country, but
I can't remember. I look, that plot was moving.
and he was like, he wanted to be the prime minister or something, and then so you're thinking he's gonna be the final boss. Then he just gets shot in the head or something by Matrix, and like 1 second after being spotted. And then it turns out that Fat Freddie Mercury is actually the real main villain.
Dude, that movie.
You've ruined this movie. It is exactly a Regular Show episode.
It really
just
is,
random
man.
things happening the whole
It
time.
really is.
No, it is. It's insane. I will say that I have to talk about John Matrix, who I'm just going to refer to as Arnold Schwarzenegger, because that's who he is in his soul.
He's Arnold.
His acting is trash.
I don't get to her soon, they'll kill her.
True. I was gonna say, should we put acting in this category? Because
I think with characters and character arcs, we're gonna also be like acting.
Acting is the supporting role of that.
It will help differentiate this from narrative as well a little bit. Arnold's acting is really butt in this movie.
It's like worse than ever, I think.
This is the worst.
This might be his
I've watched
worst.
Jingle All the Way.
He does a better job in that one.
He basically
he's
practically Orson Welles from Citizen Kane and Jingle All the Way compared to this movie. I think Kyle said this. Like 50% of his dialogue is one-liners.
I think you said that actually.
Oh, did I? And when he has to act, He says every single line the exact same
time.
way.
We were going to make a normal life here. You're a funny guy, Sully. I like you. That's why I'm going to kill you last.
The exact, and it's almost like he didn't want to be here. And I've seen Arnold give decent performances. I'm not going to say he's a great actor, but he's given decent performances before.
Predator.
Yeah, in Predator, exactly. He was great in Predator. I mean, not like the greatest actor I've ever seen, but like he was pretty good. And when you
he can bring in energy in that movie. He does not bring energy in this movie.
Yes, it's the energy from this movie does not come from his character. It comes from the absurdity of the movie itself. That is the energy. And the dichotomy, the compare and contrast between John Rambo, played by Sylvester Stallone, and his magnificent performance and nuanced depth of character, versus John Matrix. He looks like he's walked straight out of a Contra on like the NES, and he just was plopped into the movie. We don't need a Contra movie anymore. We just watch Commando. That's your Contra movie. Insane how, as the Fob said, how they made a character with such little depth. And I guess the one thing I have to give his character is that Arnold, of course, showed up in shape. His physicality, I think, is entertaining. But I will say it was so bad I was entertained, and the fact that he just says one-liners from about a dozen other 80s movies is incredible.
Yeah, they couldn't even
entertaining.
They didn't even have like original one-liners. Like he I think like half of the one-liners he made were like he'd already like he said them before.
I'll be back.
Yeah, they just it's like this isn't at a time where you can reference other movies like that. Like, that's just stealing the dialogue. That is just stealing it.
Yes, I will say a one side character that I actually didn't think was too bad was the flight attendant. I mean, was she like a great character?
What are you talking about?
Well, I'm saying like, okay, I don't think you appreciate what I'm dealing with in this movie.
Was she a great character? No, that's all.
No, but she did bring like a sort of energy to the movie at times. And I do like, there's this one scene where she's in the car with Arnold and she's like,
and then you get me involved in a shootout where people are dying and there's blood spurting all over the place, and then I watch you rip a phone booth out of the wall, swing from the ceiling like Tarzan.
She is describing exactly how I feel watching this movie, which gives me a hint that maybe this movie was self-aware and it knew what was going on. That was the only scene that made me even closely think that in the entire thing. And so for that, I'll give her some points. Let's get to scoring. We're going to start with First Blood.
I'm giving First Blood a 5 out of 5 for characters, mostly because they're all great.
Enough said. I am giving Rambo First Blood 5 points. Self-explanatory.
Well, it's on a good streak here. Another 5 for character and character arcs.
Now let's go to scoring for Commando.
So, while the characters were great and all, they really weren't. So I'm giving it a 1 out of 5.
For Commando, I am giving it a 1 out of 5 for obvious reasons. Round number 3 is our highest point category of 15 points, and that is action in choreography. I'm going to start off with First Blood, as we have been doing. This movie has a great balance of story mixed in with action scenes, and because of that, the action scenes are also more impactful when they happen. They intersplice him being tortured in all of his PTSD from war with what's going on. It's so beautifully executed that you could really feel why someone in his scenario would just freak out and start beating people up. And it's also satisfying because these cops have been very mean to him. It does have a little bit of 80s choreography to him fighting people, and I can't deny that. But that leads to this actually really engaging motorcycle car chase scene, like seeing him jump this gap and then like over like a railroad, and then seeing the police car do the same thing, and seeing a motorcycle go through like fields and then the police car like chasing him. I believe the Fob, you said it was like GTA cops. That one leads to him hanging off of a cliff and then him throwing a rock when obviously there's this guy who's trying to kill him when they doesn't want to kill him, and then they chase him into the woods, and like I said, he prepares for them, and he's like Batman. He's stealth taking him out and being like, don't push it. And then obviously there's that scene in the mine where they're shooting rocket launchers, and that's less of an action scene and more of a set piece, I would say, but I mean, it is worth mentioning. And then him just destroying the town, it's subtle but effective action. Him just going in and Officer Teasel knowing he's cooked, and him just shooting up there through the ceiling. And then that leads to that obvious powerful moment. And so I just think overall, well balanced, lots of great stuff. And I don't have any complaints. Kyle, what do you think?
Oh man, you just made me love this movie more. Also, I'm getting huge whiplash from how we talk about these movies.
What are you talking about?
Nothing. They're both awesome. I especially like the action scenes in this movie. I was often thinking to myself, is this getting too ridiculous for what this movie is? And I'm like, no, it's just where I want it to be. It's just right. These are unusual situations, but I don't think they're totally ridiculous. I don't think anyone's doing something completely out of left field or something that's completely unrealistic.
Never Fast and Furious in this place.
Not quite. I think what you made me appreciate is that later in the movie, you see how he is just a pure warrior and how he was completely able to adapt to his environment. So he was able to fight as like one of the best soldiers ever in an actual jungle. And then when he moved into the city, he made that his new battleground and he made that his environment.
Yes.
And he was able to use that all to his advantage and adapt to it. It also builds up how he was becoming more violent and destructive. He's still not killing, but he's now destroying a bunch of things around the city. So that lends himself more to the title of a terrorist. He's a pretty terrifying force.
Yes.
To be reckoned with. And yeah, I love how methodical every action scene is in this movie and the care that they put into making it all very well choreographed and everything. So
100% agree.
Yeah.
Fob, what did you think about the action in First Blood?
Peak. But seriously,
I agree.
True.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, I think every single action scene was executed very well. My favorite action scene is when he was just shooting the M60 through the roof. When he was fighting Teasel. Now that would be a great way to deal with that. So I thought that was cool. It's probably my favorite scene. It's either that or the scene where the cops were first coming after him in the jungle.
Well, actually, that's the problem. I can't even choose because I like so many
different
of them
things I like about all of them.
They're all really well done. Moving on to Commando. One thing I will say going to First Blood is that the terrain is mostly the same. It's urban, and then it's sometimes in the woods. It's pretty much the same. What I will give Commando, and this is the first time I'm not just going to completely make fun of the movie, is that it actually does have decent variety. From a spectacle standpoint, you have the home invasion aspects, and then there's this car chase that leads to. Then you have him escaping an airplane. I mean, from a high octane standpoint, it's pretty high octane. I think.
Yeah, I just seen First Blood, and then when we watched this movie, I saw him just like kind of elbow the guy and it knocked him out, right? And I was like, oh, it's gonna be this kind of action movie.
Yes.
Which I'm applying that standard to it, like not taking this movie super seriously.
Yes.
Because it's fun 80s action.
I mean, in fairness, that guy was dead tired.
And do me a favor. Don't disturb my friend. He's dead tired.
You also get to a mall. I like mall action scenes, whether it's in John Wick or other things. I like
slightly better than John Wick, but
yes,
it's okay.
You also get a little bit of like a hotel brawl in there with this one guy, which okay, I'm sorry, I don't know if this will make the episode, but just quick complaint. They built up this random black guy at the beginning of the movie.
I was thinking about that, but I was like,
get killed off at some random spot. Like, I was assuming he was gonna be the main.
I thought he was like the main.
They should have had Chainmail guy doing all the killing at the beginning.
Yeah,
it's like they changed their mind, and then you obviously have that very climactic ending, which is thankfully the best action scene in the movie, in my opinion. Yeah. You get Arnold with a bunch of different weapons, blowing through people, rocket launchers, and then just. It is very entertaining, and it's actually what I was expecting from this movie more. It is cheesy, but it's the type of cheese that I wanted watching Commando. And I think that that's really good. And it all culminates and leads to this grand finale with, well, why don't you talk about the grand finale, bud?
So he's been basically just murdering everybody with no effort. Even the main bad guys, like the main crew, like they haven't really been fighting back at all.
Venezuelan dictator or whatever.
Yeah, he gets one shot. So the only guy he has any struggle with in the entire movie is, and he has a lot of struggle with him, is this overweight guy wearing chainmail.
Chainmail
Don't forget the chainmail.
Protected him.
Leather pants. He looks like he just got out of like a gay bar. And then this is the guy. This is the guy who he's like having a full on fist fight with. I just think it's funny. I'm not even upset about it.
I forgot about that scene until you reminded me. I'm like,
and then at the end, and how he finishes it off is there's like a steam tank behind him. And the guys with the chainmail is about to shoot him, and he grabs a pipe. He grabs a giant pipe. It's probably like 100 pounds from the wall, and throws it at him, and it impales him into the steam tank
Through the chainmail. Twice.
through
Metal pipe is stronger than chainmail.
through both sides of the chainmail. I guess the chainmail didn't work, and so he's impaled into the steam tank. Steam starts coming out of the pipe through the guy's body, through like the cavity in his chest. And then at the very end, after he finally's just conked out dead with the steam coming out of the pipe, Arnold looks at him with his daughter right there and says,
Let off some steam, Bennett.
I got chills when he said that.
I got something else. I am convinced that the process of this movie is they just took regular phrases and they're like, now, how can we craft a kill around this? Let off some steam. Man. How can we? What if Arnold chucked a pipe through this guy?
I guarantee
Kill him
you.
with steam. Nah, that's stupid. Kill him with a steam pipe. Oh, yeah.
It was ridiculous. And that's not the only ridiculous
It's like
moment.
the one thing the chainmail should work against.
There's so many moments throughout this entire movie. He jumps off a plane into a 3-foot swamp. My favorite moment
Is what he was.
my favorite sequence is the mall when there's like 10 cops that dogpile him, and I was like, oh! Like the Incredible Hulk. Ah! And then like you see all 10 cops flying like
away.
different directions, and I'm like, right after that, he cuts a balloon and swings down like Tarzan, and I'm like, this movie was real. That's when I sent you that text. I was like, what?
I can't believe this.
What is happening?
Man, that was that early when you said that. It only got worse from there.
But at the same time, I do love this movie's action.
Man, I can't believe there's one you guys aren't bringing up. It was the scene where I had to rewind it because I couldn't. I was like, I'm not seeing something right. It was when he got arrested and was getting taken away, and then a flight attendant lady just takes the rocket launcher and shoots it backwards, and she's totally fine, no hearing damage or nothing. She's got the recoil handled. It just shoots backwards.
Manual,
she's
Kyle.
like, oops, and then she turns it around and blows up the cop truck. I was just like, this movie's hurting my brain.
It's over the top, ridiculous action scenes. Not thoughtful at all. They're just like, how can we get Arnold killing a bunch of guys in weird circumstances in the most absurd way humanly possible? But I kind of like that. So I will be giving it points. Let's go to scoring. As always, we're going to start with First Blood.
Because every single action scene was basically perfect in First Blood. I'm gonna give it 15.
I am giving First Blood 13, only because I feel like while I thought the action was good, I felt like I could have been blown away a little bit more.
I feel similarly, and then it's hard to give it a 15 out of a scale of 15 without it having many super iconic moments. But I cannot go lower than 14 because it is just such special attention was paid to all the detail in it, and a lot of that methodical action scenes is my preferred method.
I agree. Now let's score Commando.
The action scenes are really enjoyable. It probably didn't have too much like care put into it, unlike Rambo. They were still pretty good, so I'm gonna give it a 12 out of 15.
I am going to give Commando a generous 12 because while I don't think that the movie The way that the action scenes are placed is particularly well done. I put that more on the narrative section, which it did not score very high. I found the action to be very entertaining and everything I'd really want in a cheesy 80s action movie.
So, giving it a lot of credit for being just fun, cheesy 80s action, and then just being very bombastic and exaggerated. It's gonna be at more like a 7 or an 8, but then you reminded me of Metal Pipe, and that brought it up to a very, very generous 9.
Moving on to round number 4, we have cinematography and special effects, which is worth 10 whole points. Now, to start with First Blood, I wouldn't say I was necessarily blown away by its cinematography like I was with Aliens and even Predator to some
But how would you
respects.
have made it better?
And that's where I'm really gonna be very generous to the movie, probably, is that I think that it does its job very well. And I just love the 80s, the lenses they used to use back in the day. On the special effects side, and this is kind of a little bit bleeding into action, I think that there's a lot of cool practical stunt work. Them driving the cars, that car scene, him falling off of a cliff into a tree. I think there was times when he was falling, like they cut a little bit too much, but I get they can't have the same capabilities as maybe now. That's one thing I can say. There was never any like green screen distracting effects like there might have been in like a Predator or an Aliens. Everything felt in camera and realistic. And so
The movie just feels down to earth. It's
Yes.
almost like you're watching it happen right before you.
yes, it's very tangible. And I think that the cinematography served its purpose because it was not distracting. The editing, for the most part, was not distracting. The special effects did its purpose. The explosions were nice. I don't really have too many complaints. At the same time, I don't have too much to say. The grade was good. I think everything was solid around the board.
You got it. Nail on the head.
Yep.
Commando. The editing is terrible.
Yep. Really, really bad.
It's actually, but the way that they
They have to
Really bad
move the
cinematography.
camera in ways and adjust it in ways to where what you're looking at makes sense, even though it still doesn't.
The film is too bright as well. It's oddly bright. The grading is not great either. The framing isn't particularly good. Special effects, I'll give it a little bit of a pass. I mean, seeing Arnold jumping out of a plane, I guess, is kind of cool. And well, I think it looked a little bit better in First Blood. It wasn't like that much better. At the end of the day, I thought it was serviceable enough, but the editing is just bad. It's too bright. I don't really have much else to say other than it wasn't very visually appealing from a cinematography standpoint, and it didn't feel like narratively purposeful, probably because there's not much of a narrative to begin with. Let's get to scoring, starting with First Blood.
For First Blood, I think the special effects and cinematography was literally as good as it possibly could have been, and I don't think they could have made it any better. So I'm gonna go with First Blood as a 10.
For First Blood, I am giving it a 7. Really solid, but I feel like it could have done more.
For First Blood, I give it a 9. It's even, I was actually gonna maybe give it lower, but you reminded me of very iconic moments in it and scenes that were just very pretty.
All right, moving on to Commando.
I thought there was like the explosions were sort of cool sometimes, I guess. So it's 2 out of 10.
I am going to give Commando a very generous 3. I don't think it did anything too atrocious outside of the editing, but it's definitely below passing.
I'm gonna give Commando a 2. It's really ugly. Scenes don't look like they make sense, and it gets points for showing up, I guess.
Moving on to maybe our most anticipated category of the day, we have music and sound design with 5 points available. I actually think First Blood has really good sound design. I think the score by Jerry Goldsmith was very punchy. It was very powerful when it needed to be. It had a lot of bravado to it. And there's scenes when Rambo's scaling a cliff and that soundtrack kicks in. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily super memorable for me, but it's very brash, very bold, very orchestral. And for the 80s, orchestral music really took a back seat to a lot of synth. And so when I get that reminder of that orchestral flavor, I really appreciate this, and the music in Rambo did the job, and it did it well. As for this actual like 80s sound design, you know me, I'm a big fan, very crunchy, but it had great atmosphere. I think the atmospheric sounds of the forest or being by a waterfall, really well done, and it all came together with a perfect package that I really don't have much to complain about at all.
Soundtrack, really good, not too overbearing or anything, just really solid soundtrack. The sound design was awesome. I don't know if you talked about it, but the attention to detail was really good.
Yeah.
There was a scene where he was fighting the Teasel, right? And you could hear the buildings burning in the background. And I was just like, wow. And yeah, I just really think it's awesome.
All right, Kyle, what's your thoughts on the sound design?
Pretty much what you guys said. Sound design being the stronger portion of it than the music, but the music was never in the way. Exciting at the exciting moments, it was quiet at the quiet moments.
It served a supporting role, and it did that supporting role very well.
I prefer it to, well,
It's time.
maybe we get into this. I do need to pay more attention to music and sound design when we watch these movies. The benefit of Commando is that I did not need to pay attention to the music and sound design. That came after me. Music sound design found me. Because as I said earlier, I'm just watching this movie and the action starts. I've heard the stupid marimba playing the whole time. It was I expected it was like, oh, that was kind of weird that was at the start. Is this like an island movie?
Oh god, bro. They play it during
And
the
then
entire
the next
movie.
scenes come, and it's the same track, the exact same, where it goes boo doo 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 boo 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 doo. It's like, what are they thinking?
Not even like
What is this?
It wasn't even a good song
It
or
is.
anything.
It can be hard to like mess up a soundtrack or be so bad that it's distracting, and they did that. That is what they did. It is extremely bad. It is just completely distracting. It is the wrong tone. You just chose the wrong instrument. You just chose an instrument that can't make it work. Why did they do that?
So here's what I'm going to describe the music to, because this is how I feel about it. It started out with a decent synth riff, and I was like, okay, this is not too bad. I kind of like where this is starting. Out of nowhere, 3 good songs start playing over each other at the same time with different instruments, and they did not mesh. And I'm thinking, oh, this is already way overcooked. I think he overthought the soundtrack and thought, yeah, I'm cooking with this one. This is the greatest soundtrack.
And then you said, but I know how to really put the cherry on top.
And then when that marimba plays, that beach house dumb music plays, I was like, what am I listening to? This is garbage. And I'm like, maybe it's at the beginning. I don't know.
The logical line of thinking has abandoned us.
And then instead of the slow build up to that music, they proceed to just drop that 3 or 4 songs playing at once music in every scene in the movie. That doesn't, there's not a single, and it might
There'll be nothing going on, and it's playing during that.
and
I'm like, stop!
They might be,
Stop! Turn it off!
there might be different compositions going on. I couldn't tell because it's just the same instruments and it sounds like the same song playing at the same time. But at the end, I remember they added in a new instrument when he's fighting Chainmail Dude. And I was like, another one? And once again,
the main part.
discombobulating is how I would describe the soundtrack in this movie. It is so unimaginably bad. And I'm not even talking about, I haven't even mentioned the timing. This kind of goes to editing. The soundtrack will drop at the randomest moment. This is not cool. He just stepped out of a Jeep. The sound effects were also just very cookie cutter. You know, I mentioned how I like how 80s sound design is crunchy, and I think this has crunch, but it's too much crunch. It's all crunch and nothing else. Let's get into scoring. We're gonna start with First Blood.
All right, well, call me a shell. I know all I've been giving it is a max score, but I really just think this movie is that good. No, so that's gonna be a 5 for First Blood.
5 for First Blood. I am giving First Blood a 3. Not because it's bad, it just felt like it did its job and I wasn't distracted by it, but I wasn't like blown away by it either.
And I'll have to go with the Goldilocks approach and give it a 4. It was gonna be more like a 3 for just being... 3 is good for music and sound. I definitely prefer that. The things like Commando are just like having no good music or sounds. Then you reminded me of a couple early good attention to detail plays.
Alrighty, let's...
Go ahead, what are you laughing at?
So for Commando, we're gonna do the sound design now. And for Commando, I have a nice round number for how rounded out it was. I don't know, that's a compliment. Anyways, this movie doesn't deserve any compliments for the soundtrack because it sucks. 0.
I'm giving Commando the big old goose egg. For obvious reasons. If you listen to what we've been saying for the last 10 minutes or so, you'd know.
For mostly music, but even then for sound design, in my heart, it's like a -3 for just, maybe a -4 for just being so iconically bad. Effectively, it will be a 0. Yeah.
Yeah. This was a rough one. We are now to our final round, round 6. Themes and motifs with a total of 5 points available. I'm just actually going to start off with Commando and say that there are no themes. There's nothing to dissect.
About family and how you should save your daughter if she is
Don't let
kidnapped.
your daughter get kidnapped and kill a bunch of people to get there.
Yo, he was low-key like retarded though, because he saw the enemies coming in. He was like, yeah, go to your room.
Go away from me.
Just stay in your room, daughter. I'm sure I'll be able to handle like 50 dudes with machine guns. I mean, he kind of did, I guess. But yeah, no themes to digest here. Nothing to gnaw on. Arnold's jiggling pecs while he's shooting a machine gun. That's your themes for Commando. First Blood is about... Now, to contrast, First Blood has very central themes relating to PTSD and how we mistreated our veterans back in the 1980s for Vietnam, unfairly so. They're trying to serve our country, and it was wrong how they were treated. And this movie, especially in 82, I believe is when it came out, addressing it at that point was extremely brave.
Hot take.
Yeah.
Hot take at that point.
It's a brave movie. And Sylvester Stallone, once again, that final monologue, I know we keep coming back to it, but there's a reason. It's really good. It really drives home the themes of the movie in a way that you'd think it's beating you over the head with its themes, but it feels so authentic that it doesn't feel like, oh, okay, you're forcing this message down my throat. It feels natural, and I always love when a movie can give you a message, give you an idea, and it can be overt but not feel like it's forced.
And I come back to the world, and I see all those maggots at the airport protesting me, spitting, calling me baby killer and all kinds of vile crap.
And the movie built up to that moment throughout its entire runtime. And the way that it delved into that, the traumas he dealt, like his friend, he said his friend's body was all over him.
He's laying there, he's screaming, there's pieces of him all over me, just like this, and I'm trying to pull him off, you know, and it's my friend that's all over me.
That's horrifying. And I can't even imagine how that would feel. And it's such a powerful moment.
I think one of the most surprising things about this movie to me was just the first scene. And I think that first scene, how just uncomfortable that situation was and how it immediately puts you in the right mood for the rest of the movie. Yeah, just him talking to his friends, his wife
Or relative of sorts.
His family, and how he realizes that not only are they back and they have nothing, but now he's alone in it. If it was just that scene, then it would have been the best scene in the movie. You've pretty much said most of what I feel, and I think what I want to touch on is that I don't know what it was like watching this movie at the time, but I really want to believe that it was so powerful that it may have actually changed some people's minds on the topic. I really want to believe that was the case.
I think it's definitely possible. Like that's how impactful that speech was.
And yeah, exactly. And to be so like engrossed in that topic, that real world topic that we were dealing with at the time, show such genuine care for that part of the writing. Like that's what the movies are about.
Yeah, I 100% agree. The themes in Rambo are incredible, and I have no complaints. Let's move on to scoring now for our final round, starting with First Blood.
For First Blood, this is probably at the very least tied for the best themes in the entire bracket. So I'm gonna go with 5 out of 5.
I am going to give First Blood a 5 out of 5 for truly powerful themes that stand the test of time.
And shouldn't be a surprise, I also scored a 5 for reasons stated in this category and even a little bit before, with the themes of authority figures and how the power can go to their head.
Going to the rankings, we're gonna be ranking Commando, and for Commando, I'm gonna give it a 1 semi theme, I guess, which I guess it's all it's good for. So 1 out of 5 for Commando.
I'm giving Commando a 1. Not because it has any themes, but it didn't actively offend me like the music.
Still the most offensive soundtrack.
I kept writing it wrong. So
the other one. It's honestly how
Yeah.
about this.
We have done the math. We have calculated the scores. Bob, what is your overall scores for First Blood and Commando?
For First Blood, I gave it a 50 out of 50. For Commando, we got whopping 18 points.
I gave First Blood 43 points out of 50, and I gave Commando a very generous 22.
He gave Rambo First Blood 47 out of 50 points, and the other one, Commando, got 15 out of 50.
And there you have it. Our winner today, 140
by the skin of its teeth
to 55
out of 150.
Our winner today is First Blood. Shocking to us all. I really thought
huge upset.
Yeah, I thought Commando was gonna come back and win those later categories. However, it did not happen. Thank you all so much for watching, and remember to vote in the comments down below or on my channel in the community section on which bracket you like better, bracket A, bracket B. You guys can change the trajectory of the brackets. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you later. And then the next one is where it gets lost. It just loses.
What are they thinking?
Well,
I don't get
it. It gets better. It's like they threw in a Naruto soundtrack. It doesn't make sense!